will hand over to him for the item beginning after he gets here. Right, so shall we begin? Are there any apologies for absence, first of all?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Powell will be joining later, as you mentioned, and Councillor Stairs and Councillor Cahan sent apologies.
Thank you. And any substitutes for those, Councillor? Thank you. Good. Are there any declarations of interest on any item in the agenda? Seeing none. Good. Chair's announcements, I have none. Item 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any corrections or anything to raise on the minutes? Oh, jolly good. Seeing none, I believe I can now sign these. Thanks. Addresses by members of the public, we have none. Councillor addresses, I believe we also have none.
Yes.
Good, in which case item 7 is the project approval and delegations for affordable housing scheme, Westlands Drive and Halliday Hill. Thank you, Dave, for joining us, and Linda, I believe, is online. Linda, are you okay to introduce the item?
I will, very briefly, yes. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to hear what the Scrutiny Committee's got to say about this report tonight, and hear your comments and understand why you've called it in, really, because I would hope it's very uncontroversial. This is a scheme where the land is already owned by the Housing Revenue Account. The scheme has already got planning permission. It's a 100% affordable scheme that we're looking to build here. 6 units for social rent, 5 for affordable rent, and 4 for shared ownership, reflecting the relative priority that we give those different tenures as a city council. You know, homes for affordable rent and social rent are always a priority. Yeah, it's a relatively small scheme, but all the schemes add up, and this will make an important contribution to the homes, you know, the affordable homes that we desperately need as a city. Go towards the total target that we've set ourselves of 1,600 new affordable homes over the next 4 years during the course of the medium-term financial plan, with at least 850 of those being for social rent. So, yeah, very interested to hear your comments. Thank you very much, Chair.
Dave, do you have anything to add?
Thanks, Chair. Is that working? Yeah, very little actually. Linda's introduced the scheme fully. I suppose the only thing to update on would just be where we are at the moment in terms of bringing the scheme onto site. So we've gone through a tender for the build contract. That's just about to be resulted at the moment. So within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'd hope to award that contract. Then the contract will be mobilising for a start on site in the spring. We're looking for a sort of April 26 start, and the build should take about 12 months. So we're hoping for completion in April 27. So that's, yeah. I think that's all really. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Before I open this to the floor, please note that there's a confidential appendix. So if you want to raise any item on the appendix, please indicate, and we'll have to move into confidential session. So are there any points members would like to make on this report?
It's just a clarification. It refers to it being a low car development rather than a car-free development. Just wanted to clarify sort of the justification around that and the distinction. Thank you.
Any further questions before I hand over to Dave and Linda? Seeing none, Dave, would you like to come back in?
I will, but I don't have the car parking number in front of me, I'm afraid. It's one of the few things I haven't got. There is a very small number of car parking spaces there. I'd probably have to come back to you to let you know exact numbers. We've got a full wheelchair compliant unit on the site though, so that automatically requires one space. And then I think there's at least one, if not two, visitor spaces. I don't think it's certainly nowhere near 1-for-1 parking for residents or anything like that. So, yeah, but
Yeah.
Could you just clarify any of the provision for the bike parking for residents there as well? Is that being sort of built in? Because I know it's very difficult to retrospectively add that, so it's better that it's sort of built in right from the start. I'm sure that there's the standard obligation, but given that our requirements may change in the near future with any updates to the local plan, just wondering how that would be addressed. Thank you.
yeah, again, I haven't got that level of detail on the plans on me, but it is a planning requirement that we put secure parking in place, and that's normally indoors now rather than in sort of bike sheds or bike racks. So I'm pretty confident. I'm sorry for not bringing the detailed plans with me today, but I'm pretty confident it does include those. If it doesn't, again, I can let you know after the meeting. But, yeah.
Thank you, Dave. Are there any further points, Altaf?
Yeah, just looking at here, it says September tendering, but you said your tendering stage now. Would they be on time completion? As you said, we are already in October.
Yeah, I think we are on time. Yeah, the tender results, or the tenders, the pack came in about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So they've been assessed for quality, price, etc. There was, at the point of last week, there was just final request for confirmations from the tenderers. You're obviously under the procurement regulations. If you want to ask one of the tenderers a question, you have to open it to all of them to answer. So there was just there was just a clarification on that last week. We're expecting, that to be resolved this week. Then there's a standstill period under procurement, and then you can award the contract. So, we're on time is the short answer to the question.
Linda, I believe you wanted to come in.
Thank you. I've just had a chance to look at the planning permission that was granted. So it's 2 disabled parking spaces. And it says that there will be an increase in cycling provision, but I haven't had a chance to look at exactly how many spaces it's providing.
Thanks, Linda. Does any other member wish to raise any item on this? Seeing none, it doesn't, members will correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't sound like there are any recommendations arising from this. Seeing none, thank you very much, Linda, and thank you very much, Dave, for coming to talk to us. It was a short but sweet item. Next item, we have the antisocial behaviour policy. Lubna, I believe you're here to introduce.
Thank you, Chair.
And Richard here, yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Lubna.
Okay, so we're here to approve the antisocial behaviour policy of 2026 to 2029. And Oxford City Council is committed to tackling all forms of antisocial behaviour. Its responsibilities are integral to its role as a housing provider, environmental champion, and responsible authority for the Oxford Community Safety Partnership. So this policy fulfills the Council's duty under Section 218A, Housing Act 1996, as amended by the Antisocial Behaviour Act 2003. So it's requiring all local authority housing providers to formulate and publish antisocial behaviour policies and procedures. The Social Housing Regulation Act 2023 Neighbourhood and Community Standards requires the Council to work with local partners to help tenants live in a safe, clean and well-maintained neighbourhood and make sure they feel secure in their home. The antisocial behaviour policy and the Council's antisocial behaviour procedures are part of our commitment to delivering these standards. Oxford City Council's existing antisocial behaviour policy is reviewed every 3 years, and this current policy expires in December 2025. The policy is set out in the Council's responsibilities as a landlord, environmental protection champion, and lead member of the Community Safety Partnership. It sets out the council's view of what it is and what it isn't, and antisocial behaviour, and sets service standards depending upon the nature of the case. We've got cases that have no complainant details, so it won't be investigated. The policy describes the 5 core principles that underpin the council's commitment to tackling antisocial behaviour and activities that support these principles. These are principle number 1. No one should have to suffer from antisocial behaviour. Number 2 is going to be reports of any antisocial behaviour will be treated seriously and dealt with professionally. Principle 3 is antisocial behaviour will be addressed firmly, fairly and proportionately. And principle 4 we will work with partners in accordance in order to deliver an effective ASB service for our communities. And principle 5 is we will deliver high quality customer service. So this policy includes a reference to Oxford City Council's compliments, complaints and comments process for customers who wish to provide feedback on the service they have received. Thank you.
Thank you, Lubna. Richard, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to mention, this is the 3rd time we've come to scrutiny on this policy. We started this journey probably 12 months ago, just to describe what the service was and the process behind developing this policy, and the consultation that we had in mind to undertake, which we've done. And in the appendices, you'll see the results of that consultation, the reach of that consultation, and our efforts to involve as a broader brush as possible in terms of engagement with our communities. I also want to introduce Simon, who's joined us on the call. So Simon was integral to the development of this process too. Some of you will remember him from previous scrutiny meetings. We had a really useful tenant involvement process as well, where we had a tenant group who self-nominated to be on a working group to look at this policy in more depth, and you can see the responses that they gave to the policy and our responses to their recommendations, a lot of which were more about implementing the policy than the policy content. And then finally, I think just the consultation responses were very supportive of the existing approach to antisocial behaviour. There were a few recommendations about how we could do things slightly differently, and this was mirrored by the tenant group as well, looking at the 3 days to respond to cases which we class as sort of higher risk. And there's my response to that in the appendices too. So it's been a really robust process. It's been a really enjoyable process, actually. So very happy to take any questions that hopefully Simon and I could answer between us.
Thank you, Richard. Do members have any questions on this report? I can see Altaf, Simon and Tiago. Altaf.
Thank you. As Richard said, this is 3rd time, and if I go back to my council history, we've been dealing this policy for a long time, and I understand all the bureaucratic process. My question is regarding this consultation and the percentage you have here. How this is calculated? Because obviously you have 188 response, and from that you divide it to it. The way practically on ground, as I see, and other may come, whenever there is an antisocial behavior problem, whether it is a council on area or is a housing association on area, or where there is some drug related issues, despite having the policy going through all this legal process, in a reality when you are dealing, it takes so long and so much of sort of process, or the going around and around. It takes forever to deal one real case. So I am a councillor in a ward, so we deal with the real cases on the ground. not mentioning the individual cases or the detail of cases, but with this policy, how the process can be a swift process where the action can be taken very directly, and how do we divide this? This is just a number game of 188 responses divided into this, or do we have any other surveys where, say, for example, the people we have the policy for, how confident and how they are in thinking that this is good, it is working, is it sort of a criteria if it's good, excellent, not satisfactory? How do you measure that and getting a real feedback from the area we deal with? Thank you.
Thanks. I'll take a group of 3 questions. Simon.
I think I've got 3 questions myself. So, yeah, firstly, you talk about the registered providers and your expectations of them in this report. I'm wondering, in reality, how confident are you that they actually do the things that you say they are and we do in this report? How good a relationship do you have with them? And it would be useful to share with, if you've got contacts dealing with antisocial behaviour in different housing associations, it would be really useful to share that information with councillors, because they're meeting tenants of those housing associations all the time who are making complaints, and it's extremely difficult to get hold of anybody in those housing associations. And particularly in my ward, in the same street, I have 3 housing associations, so you often get a complaint from one about a neighbour in a different housing association from them. So what is the council doing, city council doing, to sort of coordinate that and to assist councillors to make those contacts? Specifically about fly tipping, I think it's your team that have those signs that you put up that sort of saying fly tipping operation in progress. There doesn't seem to be any coordination between ODS and your team about that. I mean, ODS must have really good data about where all the fly tipping is, because they're constantly picking it up. And I would have hoped that, following 3 or 4 reports in a short period of time, you're immediately out there with that sign. I'm wondering whether we have enough of those signs and we're being proactive about that, because there's a lot of areas where people have just given up complaining and they sort of put up with it. And then overall about the whole report, I think my issue is it's too much about responding to reports of ASB. A lot of people don't report because they've just given up and they put up with it. And I think we need to be more proactive about what we ought to be doing as a council to foresee where ASB might happen. So we're responsible for parks, we're responsible for a lot of housing, HRA land, and the design of some of that land, or the lack of design, attracts antisocial behaviour like a magnet. So I would like to think that in our policy, we've got something in that about working with our parks team and with the HRA team to get rid of some of these, or do something about these antisocial behaviour hotspots, particularly around old blocks and old bin stores, where I think it feels to residents like people have given up, and ASB can go on. Secure gates where people are constantly having parties on staircases and things like that. So yeah, I feel like we're missing that we should be proactively identifying where ASB is going and working with the police and other housing associations and other bodies to try and sort out potentially also what we are doing around youth work, or what we're doing around working with organisations like Turning Point, where we can try and identify things that people might do instead of antisocial behaviour.
And finally, Tiago.
Sorry, I can't hear anything.
Sorry, I forgot to. Okay, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
First, I want to say thank you very much for antisocial behaviour department. Your job is vital for the community in Littlemore feel more safety, and I want to appreciate that. Okay, I want also to say thank you for the report. I think it's a very good report to read. And my questions is about, if you ask me, I'm not sure if my questions is in the scope of this report, but I will do. If not, let me know, okay? The first question is, in the report said, are the 3 and 5 days response target for category 1 and 2 complaints consistently met? And I would like to know what's happened when they are not. The second question is, what is the average case duration and how does the council ensure timely closure without compromise? That compromise, okay? I don't know if you want to do more questions or this for now it's enough. I have more three. This is I can do later, but
Okay. What do you want to? Do you want to go ahead?
okay. The other question is what the mechanism exists to escalate unresolved antisocial behavior case between agency and how our residents keep informed. The other questions is how is antisocial behavior data analysis to identify stops to repeat patterns and how is this shared with councils and community? And I have more too, and I will carry on, is how will the council publicize this policy and educate residents on what count as antisocial behavior and how to report it? And the last, what feedback mechanisms exist for residents not be happy with antisocial behavior handling beyond the complaints procedure? Thank you very much.
Thanks. Well, that's actually, sorry, Richard and Simon, 3 councillors, but there's actually 10 questions between them. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you. So forgive me if I kind of rattle through them, but and Simon, chip in whenever you like. So I'll start at the top. The length of time. So Altaf talking about the length of time cases take, which I think was mentioned a bit later on, and the kind of the swift escalation process. In terms of our policy, we get involved. Our interventions are at the lowest level proportionate to the case. So we will try and use mediation. We will try and use warnings. We will look at support needs of the person that's committing the antisocial behaviour and the support needs of perhaps the victim of antisocial behaviour. So we look at the kind of the whole picture, and we have to do that with our partners and get that information and intelligence to create a proper case plan. Antisocial behaviour, when we talk about numbers, people are saying that people are giving up reporting. We have about 2,500 cases a year, so we are quite a busy team. The majority of those fall into Simon's area, so around the environmental crime, the fly tipping that Simon was talking about. And then the neighbourhood nuisance that falls under the remit of the antisocial behaviour investigation team is about 300 cases, and they tend to be more complex. They may involve closure orders, people with very complex needs, etc. So we do monitor the time that it takes, and just probably jumping down to that question about performance and how do we understand what's going on. We log all of our cases and the actions of our cases on our case management database, and we use a dashboard to pick out the information around performance. So the average length of time for a case, that differs depending on the case type. It also depends on whether we have enough evidence to progress something through court or whether we don't, and the case effectively in such things like fly tipping is literally just a clearance in the end. But where we can, we will prosecute people and, if necessary, serve notices on them and take appropriate action. So we do have a database that allows us to hotspot map locations. I'm working very closely with the intelligence analysts within the council to develop a dashboard that doesn't just have City Council ODS data, but it has partner data as well. So we can look at police crime data, CCTV data, and other community safety data sets that we overlay on top of each other and get a really good understanding of hotspot locations. Because a fly tipping hotspot is likely to be a hotspot for something else, drug paraphernalia, for example. So work is ongoing on that. That's not quite complete yet, but we are trying to get ahead of of the curve in terms of understanding hotspots. So sorry, you were talking about performance. I think that's kind of covered performance. We can look at the number of cases per officer. We can look at the number of contacts within 5 working days as per our policy. We can do all of that performance stuff at an officer level. So we do have that management information. In terms of satisfaction levels of our performance, that's the bit that we do need to develop, particularly under the Social Housing Act and the consumer standards. It is a sort of corporate-wide initiative to look at how we look at all sorts of things around our tenancies, from fire risk assessments to antisocial behaviour, and working out satisfaction levels and how we not only ask that question but capture that data and be able to analyse that is an ongoing piece of work. Moving down to Councillor Attino's questions about registered providers. And I'm sure he's very well aware that the providers that have stock in the city probably have a team that deal with it on a regional basis, and they cover a very large area. So we do have contacts with registered providers, accepting that their capacity won't be of the same nature that ours is in the city. But we work with them, so there may be the need for closure orders dealing with cuckooing in their properties. There may be a need to deal with statutory noise nuisance in their properties. We will support and help them. And when it comes to statutory noise nuisance, we have the legal duty to investigate those. So we will work with them on those. But when it comes to tenant behaviour, it's to the social landlords that we look to deal with that initially. But yeah, I absolutely accept the point that, and we are working on building those relationships more fully. And certainly when we get contact details, we will pass them over to councillors, most definitely. Fly tipping coordination with ODS. We do a lot of fly tipping coordination. We have a programme where we will go out on patrol with them early doors and identify hotspot locations for fly tipping. The question around fly tipping is about evidence. It's about opening those bags up and trying to find identification of people that would have put that stuff out there on the streets. Where we get that, we will take the necessary action around it. Quite commonly, we don't get that level. But you're right, in terms of the signage, perhaps more of those signs and identifying those hotspots using this data will be something that we'll explore. Designing out those hotspots, particularly in those bin stores and old stock. We've had some recent conversation with the ODS about the design of bin stores in some parts of the city and reverting back to more enclosed spaces, which is something for our property team, working with our property team on. In terms of designing them out, we have in the Community Safety Service a problem-solving officer. So using data and using feedback from our partners around not just antisocial behaviour, but crime-related matters. He is accredited to level 5 crime reduction standard. So he goes out, he does environmental visual audits and assessments and makes recommendations around the sorts of things that we could change to prevent the things happening in the first place. Done some significant work in Barton, in Temple Square, all across the city. The implementation of those recommendations is there are some quick wins in there, and there are some things that cost and take much longer to do. But we do have that resource, and he is a very busy person. He's actually got an Oxfordshire-wide footprint, so he does work in the other districts as well, although he's employed by the city council. Just going down, we do work closely, particularly around serious violence, on youth work, youth activities, youth diversion. Definitely celebrate the opening of the Blackbird Leys hub. And we work very closely with Youth Ambition and the County Council's Targeted Youth Support Service, where we do get increases in antisocial behaviour and crime related to young people. That team will go in there and do some detached outreach and try and divert people into activities within their local community. So we are well connected into those agencies and those teams. Likewise with Turning Point and the police. The police are we are in absolute regular contact, and our teams convene problem-solving meetings where we bring necessary partners in to resolve cases. That could be a GP, it could be the police, it could be adult social care, child social care, Turning Point, registered providers, whoever is necessary to help resolve the case and identify what the actual issue is. And that's perhaps a bit that takes a bit longer, is finding out what's happening behind that behaviour and trying to find the proper solution. I haven't mentioned any of the internal teams in housing, but we're in constant contact with them and working closely with those. I'm not sure whether I'm on question 10 yet. I'm just running down my list. We do use other interventions around unnecessary behaviour, fly tipping, things like CCTV cameras. We will put those up in fly tipping hotspots where they will work effectively. There are some places you need electricity, you need them not to be seen sometimes and have covert ones. So sometimes it's about the location, but we will use them whenever we can. I'm just trying to read my own writing. Timely closure, I think I've covered the timely closure process, but we do monitor the average time and the time that things have been open for, and supervisors will review cases with individual officers if they are particularly difficult to resolve or they've been open for too long. Finally, in terms of closing a case, we speak to the complainant and talk to them about, first of all, at the beginning of the case, how often they want to be contacted and how. And then when the case we make inactive, when we can open it at any time, but we talk to them about closing the case because of lack of evidence, maybe the issue's stopped, and we have that dialogue with the complainant. So I'm hoping I've covered everything that was in the questions, and forgive me if that was a bit of a speedy ramble. Simon Manton, was there anything that you feel that I've missed out in response to those questions?
I think you've covered it in the roundabout way, going through. To reiterate what Richard was saying, in relation to sort of the length of a case, that will always vary on many different factors. But what we do try to aim for, we do try to keep a case to around a 3-month for closure within CRT. That's what we aim for. We don't always get there. Some cases sometimes take longer, and they may well be escalated, as was mentioned, to other agencies or maybe internally to our ASBIT team as well, if the behaviours demonstrate a need for it. Picking out about fly tipping as well. So we do get data from ODS. I've got data from ODS, and they'll give us information in relation to where they're finding the most fly tips within the city. So we are aware of that, and we do try to coordinate things with ODS. We get data sets from them in relation to where they're picking up sharps, where they might be picking up condoms, lots of information like that. So it does sort of shape where we go. They've identified a few recently, and we've tasked officers with going there more frequently. As Richard said, with the fly tipping, we do require to have to find evidence in relation to pursuing that. But fly tipping is always a bit of a difficult one. But there is a liaison with ODS, with streets, and some of the waste recycling team as well. So I think you covered it all.
There was one more, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes,
Tiago's point with regards to the comms and the feedback to residents, and also the mechanism to escalate through the agency and how the residents are kept up to speed.
Yes, thank you for that. So in terms of notifying people how to report antisocial behaviour, we have many different channels, and we can always be better at this. We're talking about the internet, social media posts, we're talking about leaflets, we're talking about information in the newsletter, Tenants in Touch. We're talking about our own internal council officers knowing how to refer internally, because quite often the disclosure goes to a housing manager, for example, and then they will refer it into our Safer Oxford email address. We have an email, a generic email that's monitored every day, and the cases are picked out of that and then allocated to the case manager, then make contact with the complainant. So we do as much as we can in terms of advertising what we do, and then triaging those cases that come through. But you know, we can continue to do that in any way that we can. In terms of people that are dissatisfied with the service, if they're dissatisfied with the conduct of a member of staff, then there is a complaints process internally in the council, which I think we're all aware of. If they're dissatisfied with the outcome of the case, then they can ask for an antisocial behaviour case review, and it's detailed in the report. This is written in statutes, and there is a criteria for when you can ask for that review. And then we will bring a multi-agency group together. We'll have it independently. If it's about a case that we were investigating it, we will not chair the panel. We'll ask somebody else, probably from another district council, to do so. They will bring together the relevant partners and they will pick that case apart. They'll go through the chronology, they'll go through what we knew, when and how we responded, and they will make a decision on whether there is a justification for what we did, or whether we should have done better, and the learning points from it. We haven't had, I think we've had very few reviews on us. We have conducted reviews on registered providers, on the police, on other people, and it's a really healthy process, actually. I know it's promoted nationally by the government, and I'm in conversations with the Police and Crime Commissioner's office at the moment at Thames Valley level about how to make that a more consistent process across all the local authorities in Thames Valley. So that's the ultimate kind of sanction. If that is still dissatisfied, then there's always the approach to the Ombudsman.
And on a case-by-case basis as well, we're regularly in contact with people anyhow, and giving them advice, either in person, over the phone, or via email, in relation to the cases as well, before it even gets to a formal stage.
Thank you, Richard and Simon. I've started, so I'll finish on this item, as they say on Mastermind, and then hand over to the real chair. Are there any further questions? I can see Catherine and Chris. Catherine.
Thank you. Some of these possible clarifications building on earlier points. Just on the issue around the landlords, so the housing associations not necessarily taking seriously perhaps some of the concerns that are being raised. I know that certainly I'm hearing from residents that when they've got a complaint, whether it's antisocial behaviour or otherwise, they're not getting any response from some housing associations, which, you know, obviously is a concern. And I wonder, sort of connected to that, the fact that with some complaints, then we're signposting residents to back to their housing association when we know they're not delivering. Is that the right thing to do? You know, should we be a bit more proactive in addressing some of those if we know that they're failing in their duties to residents on that? Connected point is, you know, what are the obligations also on some of the housing associations to be actually advertising their complaints process as well as the councils in the buildings, and yeah, to what extent then connected to it is there an issue with double reporting? Because I kind of feel that, you know, residents might have to report both to the council and to the housing association. Then when in the current policy, when it talks about the registered providers, it connects to this issue of antisocial behaviour to the residents of those properties. But from personal experience, I know where, you know, being a non-resident that has an issue with a property, you basically come to a bit of a blank wall. There doesn't seem to be anything that can be furthered because you don't live in that block, even if there is ASB in the block that's affecting you. So those are all kind of connected to the registered providers. One point on the noise app, it mentions in your notes that there was going to be a review on that. I just wanted to know what the outcome outcome was regarding the residents' concerns around difficulties in using it. And then the third point with regards to the data on fly tipping, and I know we've talked about fly tipping a lot, but I wonder whether some of the data that you get from ODS, whether you overlay any of that with some of our HMO licensing data, because I know on the one hand, you say that you're trying to do evidence gathering, but one of the big things that are fly tipped frequently are mattresses, and people generally don't walk very far down the road when they fly tip them, and they're usually actually outside the property that they originated from. And I wonder to what extent are you looking to work then internally with the HMO team around addressing that. And then a very final but brief point. I know that Brooks are very good at having a contact point for residents, but the university doesn't seem to have such a centralised system. So to what extent have you worked with them to try and identify a centralised way for concerns to be filtered through Oxford University rather than Brooks, sort of replicating the good practice that Brooks has? Thank you.
And Chris.
Thank you, Chair. And just a couple of quick questions from me. So the first one is in the section on policy principles, it mentions that information on antisocial behaviour and how to do reporting and so on is provided in different languages. And I just wanted to ask sort of what information is currently provided in different languages and what languages they are, and if there are current gaps where there are large demographics in our city that have English as a second language or not even English at all, but where we don't currently provide information in those languages. My second question was around the equalities impact assessment. And in there, it talks about there being no adverse impacts of the policy having been identified. And it struck me while reading that there is a wealth of evidence that certain demographics are far more likely to be accused of antisocial behaviour and to face sanction for antisocial behaviour, including up to the point of criminal prosecution, particularly young black men. And so I wanted to ask, firstly, how that's reflected in the way the council handles antisocial behaviour complaints and how it mitigates against sort of institutional racism within antisocial behaviour reporting and sanction.
Thanks. Richard and or Simon, would you like to come back in?
So just again working down the list of questions. So I think it's probably important to spell out that the policy is it's a city council policy. So where we've got reports about behaviour within registered providers stock, our first port of call is to direct people to there. And I absolutely take the point, Councillor Miles, that the response from RPs may not be of the same type that you might get from the city council. So working with them, we are trying to develop closer relationships, as I said before. I think for me, if you are not getting the support that you need or the response that you need, by all means, if it's an issue between the RP tenant and somebody who's not a registered provider tenant, then you can contact Safer Oxford, and we'll look into that and see how we can work with the RP around that. If we still get nowhere, if you still get nowhere, that antisocial behaviour case review process is available, and that may trigger a response. Because that's quite a hefty thing to trigger. So it's difficult to speak for our, we do work with them, like I said before, particularly where we have a statutory duty to investigate statutory nuisances. The local authority have got the power to do so under the Environment Protection Act. So we do that, and I know that they work closely with the police on things like adult cookering cases, and the power of having a closure order is something that the council or the police have rather than them. But yeah, it's a work in progress. We are still working and developing our relationships with them, but totally get the point that the social housing stock in this city, there is a significant amount from various different registered providers, and it's important to develop that multi-agency working. In terms of the noise app, this was brought up by the tenants in our working group as well, and there were kind of mixed views about its efficacy. We are conducting a review. It hasn't finished yet. We've got an officer dedicated to looking into it. We've been in contact with the company that run it and all their documentation. We've also got monitoring equipment that's at a very high noise monitoring calibration. So I'm particularly keen and interested in understanding what you can capture on your phone in different scenarios. An open window, you can pick up a lot of noise. A closed window, when you're in your bedside, maybe you can hear it, but maybe the phone can't. That's the sorts of things that I think we need to get to the bottom of. Where there is an indication from the noise app that there is a case to be made, then we will offer the noise monitoring equipment, which has got a higher technical specification. And so we can gather that evidence. And it's the evidence that we're always after, because if these cases escalate to court, it's what the court expect to see. And we can't, well, we all know what is required in court around evidence. It's something that is compelling, and it's something that you can convince a magistrate or a judge. So we need to be more than word of mouth. That's the initial start of investigation. We have to move to the evidence. It's the same with fly tipping and any other case that we've got. Very good idea around HMO licensing data and fly tipping. Absolutely take your point that you don't carry a mattress very far. And if we do get a hotspot where mattresses and things like that are stored, we will look to other mitigations and evidence gathering techniques around it. But that's what we're after. We're after seeing the person actually dump it, or something that connects that to an individual, which is where life can be quite tricky. The university relationship, I meet with the university and Brookes University every Monday morning. I meet as a group. So their security services of both universities, and we talk about antisocial behaviour and the issues affecting students and local communities. So although Brookes publish a dedicated line, the university don't. The university have an extensive security team, an extensive CCTV system and other apparatus, and they should be able to respond. So I'm not sure whether that's advertised on their website, the contact details, but the University Security Service, USS, under the University Marshal, we have very good relationships with them, and they have people in vehicle. I mean, they are called out all times of day and night, people in vehicles and things like that. So it shouldn't be difficult to try and get you the contact details for them, and I can raise it next Monday with them as well. So that won't be a problem. In terms of languages, so we offer Language Line as a council, and I think we could do more around promoting how to report antisocial behaviour in different languages, particularly in our communal areas, in our blocks. When it comes to actual cases and the need to communicate with people who are a victim of, or maybe the alleged perpetrator of antisocial behaviour, then we do translate our letters, our notices, and our correspondence into the appropriate languages. So, but I'm sure there is more that we can do around that, and we will take that away and look into it. The issue around the equality impact assessment. So I think it's fair to say that of the vast majority of people that we deal with in our team are adults. The reports are normally tenant on tenant, or they're in relation to environmental issues. So I'm not okay. So I think we need to go away and just double check this, but there isn't anecdotally a lot of evidence to suggest that we have a lot of cases involving people from a particular community and that they have been targeted. It's normally we are responding to reports by tenants, and that's what we look into, and they are normally the house owner, the person on the tenancy agreement. So when it comes to antisocial behaviour in public spaces by young people, as I said earlier, that tends to be work where we look at diversion activities, and we work with Youth Ambition, targeted youth support, etc., etc. So, but I can go away and have a further look into that. So have I think I've covered everything. Have I covered everything off? I think I have. unless Simon, you want to come in on any of that.
No, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add, in relation to the weekly meetings that you have with Oxford Brookes, Oxford University, we also have a monthly meeting with Oxford University that occurs, which our crime prevention officer goes to. And in relation to Oxford Brookes, we also meet with Oxford Brookes on a operational case by case basis every Thursday morning as well.
Thank you, Simon. Alex has a question.
Thank you. Sorry to have missed the initial presentation, but I just want to pick up on Councillor Jarvis's question, because I think the point that Councillor Jarvis was trying to raise there was the extremely broad social scientific literature, which suggests that within the context of antisocial behaviour, particular communities are particularly likely to receive complaints about them and for those complaints to be upheld. So I don't think so much I would focus on the question there of, is there a particular issue in the city right now, but more, what are we doing to prevent the policy being used against particular communities? I mean, I wanted to point out it's not just actually for example, young black men, but we also know that antisocial behaviour accusations are frequently made against members of the LGBTIQA+ community and other communities who are disproportionately more likely to experience homelessness as a result of their social positionality. And I think in that regard, it would just be good if it were possible to expand on, how are we being alert to and protecting against that? Because I would have thought that those might have been things we'd have at least noted as potential risks within the equality impact assessment. And I did want to pick up on a particular element in category 2 of the target time settings on page 40, which is we have a list, a section there that mentions allegations of sex working and sexual acts. I'd just like to know, like, what specifically does the sexual acts section of that mean? I understand the first point around sex working. Are we talking about in public there? What is that part of the wording intending there? Because my worry on a particular note is those are the types of allegations that get made against people who are perhaps being gender non-conforming or in other forms not adhering to people's expectations in public spaces. And I'm just a bit worried that that sort of unclear wording, it concerns me. So it'd be good just to have a response on that, please.
Before I bring officers in, are there any further questions from members? Simon.
Sorry, just one question. The relationship you have with ODS workers, because obviously our ODS staff are in and out of our blocks all the time, cutting grass, fixing things, whatever. Is there a high enough expectation on them that they won't just walk past antisocial behaviour, particularly fly tipping, but anything else, group of people hanging around outside, having done their job and not report it, and that they should report it? Because I'm pretty confident that if I go to some block, I will find fly tipping, and I'm sure ODS have been there and they haven't reported it. So I want higher expectations of our staff, ODS and housing officers, to have a zero tolerance to any sort of antisocial behaviour.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, can I bring Richard and/or Simon back in, please?
Yeah. Okay. So in response to the equality impact assessment and minoritized communities, I think so. It's difficult to collect data on people around ethnicity, gender, and other protected characteristics because they don't disclose them. So it's quite a challenge to identify whether there is a disproportionate representation within our cases, apart from anecdotally through supervisory activity, because all of the cases get reviewed. Simon made a good point earlier on about the complainants in cases are contacted at a frequency and regularity and kept updated of their choosing and in a method in which they want to be spoken to. So we try and build that relationship with complainants and with the alleged perpetrators of antisocial behaviour, because often dealing with the issue is not about enforcement, it's about understanding the support needs of an individual and working in partnership to deal with those. So I don't have the data set that could identify that. What I've got trained staff and a supervisory process that if we felt that we were acting if there was a hint of us acting in a way that that was what's the word I'm looking for, unfair to particular members of the community, then that would absolutely be raised. So yeah, I hope that answers your question in that regard. It's not something that we are not aware of, and I wonder whether this may play out in other criminal justice scenarios more so than it does in the sorts of cases that we deal with. In terms of homelessness, though, that it's really useful for you to raise that point. We do have staff that liaise with people who are homeless. There is a lot more vulnerability and a lot more complexity of cases in our temporary accommodation stock, in our general needs stock. We do liaison with people rough sleeping, so we get a relationship with them and we understand them. We make sure they get the right referrals into Turning Point, for example, mental health needs, GPs and things like that. So if you were to look at our enforcement statistics, you would find, I think, in terms of behaviour between people, a relatively low number of enforcement activities, unless we are doing closure orders which protects a vulnerable person from those people exploiting them. Less so in terms of environmental crime, as you'd expect. We will deal with people who are fly tipping, dumping litter and things like that. But our ethos and remit and the mature partnership work we've got in the city is about understanding the nature of a problem and trying to find the best solution for that. And it often isn't enforcement. In terms of sexual acts, that's to do with people performing sexual acts in public. It doesn't happen very often. Sex working is some people, people are exploited, forced into that. It doesn't happen that often on the streets in Oxford. It's more inside premises. But sexual acts will be things where we have, on the odd occasion, come across situations where people are, in terms of public decency, it's stepped over that line. So that's what that refers to. It's not an opportunity to deal with the kind of the normal behaviour that you'd expect from people. And then finally, sorry, just going back to fly tipping. Simon, I'll take that forward with ODS, the issue around fly tipping. The reports that we get come through Fix My Street, which is normally from members of the public, or ODS Contact Centre, where they look at Fix My Streets and then they send a crew out and they identify the specific location and let us know. And if there's an enforcement opportunity, we will take that. But in terms of doing their rounds and coming across fly tipping and then doing a referral into us automatically, I'll follow that up and see what that looks like. Because you're right. I mean, them and street scenes are out and about regularly, and we have a really good relationship with them. I mean, so if it's not happening, it would be an easy thing to set up.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any further questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we turn to recommendations, and I will start us off if we may. What do members think of a recommendation that officers should at least explore the feasibility of gathering data on protected characteristics of those complained about through the ASB service, and also those making the complaints? So I'm dealing with a case at the moment where there are a number of complainants, all of whom are from minoritized groups. And although there is alleged to be a racial element to the ASB, although that's not the main thing that is being complained about. So in both cases, if it is feasible to gather that data, I think that it could be useful. Do members of committee accept that recommendation? Good. Are there any further recommendations from members?
I mean, I liked all we heard about the proactive stuff we're doing to try and prevent antisocial behaviour from happening, not just responding to it. But I don't see that in the policy, and I'd like to see part of the policy describing some of the things that we've heard today of what the council is doing in terms of proactive work to identify where it's going to happen and doing whatever is necessary to make that not happen, whether that's working with youth groups or redesigning blocks.
So can I interpret that recommendation as being rather than an amendment to the report, that the council should publicise the work that it's doing in that respect, and thereby hope to attract more participants or more people to take part, or do you think that should be an amendment to the report?
Well, I mean, I think that should be what we're doing. And often that's more effective than respond. It's already happened. It's just responding to it. So I'd like to think that different parts of the council are a bit more joined up about this, and that parks and housing are liaising with the ASB team and addressing areas that they're responsible for where there's likely to be lots of ASB, and try and make them areas where there's not going to be ASB.
So, sorry, is that a recommendation to set out, that we should set out what we are doing? Officers should set out what we're doing in that respect.
What we aim to do.
And what we aim to do. Okay, that seems to formulate a recommendation. Are members of committee okay with that? Good, good. Thank you. Any further recommendations? Sorry, Celeste, are you happy that the recommendations are concise and understandable to officers?
Yeah, thanks for checking in, Chair. Yeah, so far I've got to the first one being the officers to explore the feasibility of gathering data on protected characteristics, as well as those who are making the complaints. But also the second one, just a bit more clarification on that, Chair, if you don't mind. So is it, as you questioned earlier, is it to set this out in the policy, or is it for the council to publicise the work that that it's doing? If you could just clarify that last recommendation, please, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Simon.
Well, if our policy is a document that tells us what we intend to do, is that what our policy is? Then I think it should be part of an appendix to the policy, maybe.
Okay. Okay. Does that clarify? Catherine.
Just on the recommendation that you put forward, Mike, I think it's not just about data collection, it's analysis, because too often what happens is data is collected. So I think if we can, in the recommendation, ensure that there's the word both collection and analysis, but also that caveat, we recognise that some of the data will be potentially incomplete based on what Richard has said, because there will be validity problems with it.
Good points. Thank you, Catherine. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, linked to that, I wonder if analysis and a request for a report back on this to scrutiny on the data specifically at a point, probably a couple of years from now, to give them time, but so that we have a chance to check in on how it actually looks.
I would certainly support that, members of group. Yes, good. Okay, do we have sufficient clarity on those two recommendations? Yep, I think we do. Any further recommendations from members of committee? Seeing none. Good. Simon.
Do we want anything about registered providers in?
So may I? So on that point, I think maybe this is a question to Richard. What could we be asking you to do, because I'm not sure what is actually feasible given the limited control you have over them. But what worries me, and this is in different aspects of what we do as a council, is increasingly we outsource a lot, and therefore we're outsourcing that responsibility, and the people we're outsourcing to, whether it's housing or other things, then aren't delivering on that responsibility. So that it just troubles me. So what could we be asking you to do? Thank you.
Richard.
So in the policy, it talks about one of the principles is working in a multi-agency way. So that's the umbrella in which we can put our relationship and our working with RPs. It's about the plan behind that, isn't it? It's about the implementation of that principle and what that looks like. So one part of me can reassure you and say, in fact, Laura, who's on the call, and we've just been talking about safeguarding, has reached out to about 6 different RPs only today. So we are taking that forward, but I suppose you want something a bit more systemic than that, in case those relationships kind of fall away. So maybe there's something about, again, a future report back about the health of that relationship and how it works out. Because it's not, I mean, reaching out to them is the beginning, and then it's about effective ASB management between us. So rather than put something in that ties an RP into something in our policy that we might not be able to deliver, it's how do we deliver how do we implement that policy on that multi-agency aspect, and maybe reporting back to Scrutiny on how we're getting on. I don't know whether that helps, but it's difficult to sign other people up to our policy, I suppose.
And does that align with what you were looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it could be that we therefore are asking them as, so it's not necessarily a requirement, but requesting that they provide a report to us on the ASB reports that they've received, because what we'd like to possibly understand is to be able to see, well, does that match up with the kind of reports we're getting, if there is that element of double reporting? And if they're not receiving any or acting on any, then we also know that potentially they're not doing their job properly. And we also will know, if they don't even provide a report, that they're also failing in that duty. And then we can maybe sort of escalate some of these issues. So maybe the recommendation is that we're including in a policy approach to request information from the RPs on the ASB reports that they receive.
Yeah.
Any comments on that, Richard?
Yeah, that sounds like a really good approach. I think if we can, within our policy, have a statement that says something along the lines of asking our registered providers locally to provide us with the information of levels of antisocial behaviour in their stock, then that gives us the wedge in which to work with them on these issues. So I think that certainly sounds like a sensible approach to me.
It sounds like we have a recommendation, as Richard's helpfully formulated. Is that okay with committee? Good. Any further recommendations? Seeing nothing, I'm particularly looking at Simon in case you put your hand up at the last minute. No. Okay. Good. In which case, that concludes the item. We have the 3 recommendations. Thank you very much, Richard, Simon and Lubna, for contributing to the item. And I will now move over and let the real chair take over.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you very much for stepping in as well. I am apologies to the committee for my being late today, but it seems like we did very, very well in formulating some recommendations. Thank you as well for being able to step back in. So we're going to talk as our third substantive item about the annual safeguarding report. We again have Councillor Arshad and Richard here. We are also joined by Laura Jones, our safeguarding coordinator, who is online. So I'll pass over to Lubna and the officers to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The 2024 to 2025 annual safeguarding report outlines the safeguarding work that is carried out by the whole of Oxford City Council over the last year. So the key items to note include the corporate leadership team's recognition of the potential impact on staff welfare when managing safeguarding concerns. The People's team are developing a training and package of varying support tools in response to this. So Tom Hook, the Deputy Chief Executive for the City and Citizens Services, became the accountable officer for safeguarding. following the corporate leadership team restructure earlier this year. The staff safeguarding questionnaire saw another high response rate from staff, with 321 responses, which informed the safeguarding action plan, training package, and the communications for the year. A joint safeguarding board-led professional curiosity audit earlier this year saw Oxford City Council return the third highest number of responses across all Oxfordshire partner agencies, demonstrating the council's strong safeguarding culture. The 2025 annual staff safeguarding questionnaire will be released within the next month, and all councillors are encouraged to complete this. Domestic abuse awareness has risen, with 62 risk assessments completed and 51 referrals to the sanctuary scheme in the first 6 months of 2025. My concern, reports have doubled in the last year, with the quality of recording increasing significantly, demonstrating an ever-improving response to the safeguarding for all officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did officers have anything to add at this stage, or are we happy to proceed to questions?
Nothing to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to questions. Councillor Altaf Khan.
Thank you. As previous report, again, this is one of the sort of legal requirement of the council and a very bureaucratic exercise which happens every year, and where there are too many this multi-agencies work, I do see that in coming years it did improve, but there is still a question which I have discussed in the past with the current cabinet member and the officer of the third sector, the voluntary sector. How do we deal with them? Where if we are talking about this, so again, please excuse, I'm not a officer, I'm a ordinary street person, and I see it when I face the reality in the local setting. So the aim is to safeguard children, adult, everybody, safe working, not to be abused in any way. So how does, as a city, we are confident and we think that we can, or we are dealing very actively, efficiently with the third sector, voluntary sectors, where there are some areas where we have some control, and I would highlight like community centers and community places where there are community organizations whom we grant, or there are centers we as a council deal with them, and there are some voluntary area where we don't have the direct control. So we have direct, indirect, or no control in some places, but how as a city we are satisfied that we are with the multi-agency work, there is no say case is going to happen. So to me, one case is too many cases. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take another couple of questions and we'll go for a round of answers. I see Councillor Jarvis and then Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Chair. I have a very quick question which may become a recommendation, but I may have had to leave by then, but just to flag to the committee that if anyone wants to take up the recommendation, they're welcome to. This is just I'm looking at pages 110 and 11 on adult exploitation and modern slavery. I just wondered if we could get any detail on how the figures in the report compare to previous years. And the recommendation that I foresee coming is that in future annual safeguarding reports that a comparison between previous years is provided so that we can see where progress is or is not being made.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Miles.
Thank you. A similar point actually on the sweep data, it states that there were 33 nights where that was I think, put in place that protocol, and that there were also the opportunities for heat alerts and emergency accommodation. But yeah, how does that compare over time? You know, is that increasing as weather's becoming more extreme? And a connected question to that is, you know, what are the costs of that? How are we budgeting? Are we looking at how that is changing over time to ensure that we have sufficient budget allocated to cover those costs? Second question is just around the youth ambition interventions. Do you have that data split by ward to know where these interventions are happening? And then finally, how do you work with my concern where issues are then getting passed on to the county council, for instance, in cases where it relates to adult social care, and so they're passed on? And if that those issues are continuing to manifest themselves and residents are raising the issue again, is there a feedback loop that you have between the county council and yourselves to ensure that some of these ongoing issues are continued to be addressed? In my ward particularly, we've got a lot of demographics are where issues of dementia and things like that are coming into play a little bit more prominently. And if people are living on their own, these issues do raise their head, and just wanting to ensure that vulnerable people are looked after in those circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Councillor Arshad and the officers for a round of responses, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just trying to find the first. The first question was around how do we ensure that the voluntary sector are basically playing their part in safeguarding, and that is so the structure within Oxfordshire around the multi-agency safeguarding arrangements, that's a legal requirement for the two boards to be in existence and to work with relevant organisations within the voluntary sector. So that's the Adult Safeguarding Board and the Child Safeguarding Partnership. So we have a role to play in that, in terms of, as you say, there are some things that we can't affect. We have no connection with those organisations, but we do grant fund organisations. And I know that you raised this issue a couple of years ago about how are we reassured that they have safeguarding policies and procedures in place. And on the back of that recommendation, I'll bring Laura in, but she's done an awful lot of work with the organisations that we grant fund. So now every grant funded voluntary sector organisation has a safeguarding policy. In fact, I'm going to bring Laura in there before I say things that aren't 100% accurate. Over to you, Laura, on that issue.
Thank you. Yes, that is a good point. And off the back of your recommendation, Councillor Altaf Khan, we did make huge progress towards making sure every grant funded organisation has a safeguarding policy in place. Some didn't, they now do, and we didn't offer grants until that was in place. You mentioned that we do have some control, but there are going to be circumstances where we don't. We ask that all organisations that we work with do have their own safeguarding policy. I would also like to mention that one of the subgroups of the Oxfordshire Safeguarding Adults Board is an engagement subgroup, and voluntary sector organisations are encouraged to attend those, that subgroup. So we do see voluntary sector organisations there committed to the work of the Safeguarding Adults Board, and also considering that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility across Oxfordshire. If any of our officers notice anything not in their line of work, but something that another organisation is doing or not doing, then they're encouraged to report that as well.
Okay, and then I'll move on to the question from Councillor Jarvis about modern slavery and adult exploitation. So absolutely, we can bring forward previously year comparisons on that. The numbers have gone up slightly. Nicola Bell, who is the officer in my team, again has an Oxfordshire-wide footprint. These are Oxford statistics, not Oxfordshire statistics. But the number across the board has increased. That's not success. It fluctuates with the issues that are being reported, and it depends on the context of the exploitation. So you may have multiple victims who are victims of exploitation from a commercial organisation, for example. So the numbers do go up and down. I think the nature of the exploitation is probably useful to know: labour exploitation, sexual exploitation, etc., and the circumstances in which that takes place. But yes, absolutely. In terms of recommendation, we can give you annual comparisons on that. In terms of SWEP, I think, Laura, we'd need to go back to the single homeless and rough sleeping team about the funding for SWEP. It was, let me get this right, it was a pretty wet year and cold year last year, but as you say, Councillor Miles, it fluctuates with the weather conditions, so heat or freezing. But we can find out from them whether that is an unusually high number and how they make the financial provision for that. Ward data. So Youth Ambition tend to focus in certain areas of the city, in certain wards. We can certainly get that information from the Youth Ambition team and give you data on that. And then finally, My Concern. So our process with My Concern is that we've seen the numbers increase and increase and increase over the years, and that is pretty much down to the confidence of staff to know and recognise safeguarding and to report that into us. Where there is a adult social care referral, the purpose of My Concern is for Laura and myself and Liz Jones to review those cases pretty much on the day that they get logged, to make sure that the safeguarding actions and activities are done immediately. And the quality of that has drastically improved over the last few years. Most definitely, everybody has to do safeguarding training. It's mandatory. And we are seeing that there's less and less need for us to intervene and make recommendations. Adult safeguarding referrals are clearly one avenue that is relevant in certain cases. But we don't necessarily, unless we have continuing involvement in that case, because we are a relevant partner and have a need to know, we won't necessarily be part of that feedback loop. They won't share information that's confidential to us, rightly so, if we don't have a part to play in that. Now, if there are tenants, that's likely that we do have very, very significantly have a part to play in that. But if it's from another provider, it would probably be the social landlord that they will be liaising with and other relevant services. So that feedback loop isn't a given. It is only where we have a real part to play in the continued support in that case. So I hope that's sorry, I can't actually see the room any longer. So I hope that's answered your questions.
Thank you very much. We will do another round of questions, but I think that was everything covered for now. Councillor Miles, I can see your hand. I'm just going to see if there's any more hands and take them in turn. Not for the moment. So I'll go to Councillor Miles for your question.
Yeah, it's just on the last point, Richard, just ensuring that there is reassurance. So you have that reassurance that the case is continuing to be handled and looked after, because what I've noticed on a few occasions, and it's through no fault of the city council at all, but it's when things get passed on, it sort of goes into a black hole, and you just want reassurance for residents that cases are continuing to be handled and they haven't just gone into someone's inbox in another agency and forgotten about it. So I don't know what we can actually do to address that, just to ensure that there's reassurance. And I understand that from a confidentiality perspective, we don't need to know any of the details, but it's just ensuring that that we know that it's been handled is beyond that initial complaint or issue being logged, concern being logged. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know whether there is anything we can do. Do you have any ideas, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I'll bring Laura in as well on this, I think. So when we make a referral, we do, and we may phone their consultation line first to see whether a referral is appropriate. But when we do make a referral, we do receive the referral number, so we know it's landed. But the investigation that goes on after that process, we may not be involved in that or get any feedback on that. Now, I don't know whether there is an opportunity to seek that out as the referrer. But I can ask that question, colleagues in adult social care. But Laura, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think responses from adult social care are a bit hit and miss, but we do follow those up. If we receive a response to say that it doesn't actually meet the threshold for an adult safeguarding referral, then we'll take other steps and explore other options that we can do, such as the multi-agency risk management process. If it does meet the threshold, then they'll open an inquiry and they'll be allocated to a social worker. So I think if we don't hear a response, officers are encouraged to follow that up. We're encouraged to escalate if we believe that it should be opened. And that kind of data is talked about at the Performance and Quality Assurance subgroup of the Adults Board, of the Children's Partnership as well. So I think we do receive feedback. We have a way to contact, an email address to contact to ask if someone is open already, to make direct contact with their social worker, and they are responsive to that. So I think it's just about ensuring that that happens every time.
Thank you very much. Were there any more questions members wish to raise in the room? In that case, I did have one question, which is just thinking really about, obviously we've got the section on page 109 covering support for asylum seekers, refugees and migrants. And obviously this is the 24-25 report. But I wondered if there was a view from officers about whether recent political events, thinking particularly of the sort of incidents we've seen of far-right protests, have affected the need of support services and have affected safeguarding concerns for those communities. Because, you know, thinking of the kinds of issues that come up in terms of safeguarding, issues around mental health, for example, I would have a headline concern, and you know, this will be somewhat anecdotal. I appreciate it's not covered in the report, but nonetheless, while we are here, is that something you think you've been seeing in your teams?
So I can't speak for the housing colleagues that are leading on the City of Sanctuary and the Ukraine home scheme and the placements in the community of asylum seekers, but I do chair a multi-agency meeting supporting the Holiday Inn in Grenoble Road. So those conversations, and that is a monthly meeting with hotel management and other multi-agency people. That conversation has happened very recently, obviously, for obvious reasons, and getting a sense check. In fact, I visited the hotel 2 weeks ago and spoke to some of the service users there and some local councillors. Councillor Smith was there as well, and asked that question: what is their feeling? And so I'm not going to make a sweeping statement about how people do feel, but I asked specifically, there are people that protest out there at weekends. How does that, you know, how is that playing out in the service users who are living a couple of 100 yards away or 100 yards away? And what are the processes and mechanisms to capture any safeguarding issues, mental health issues, anxiety, isolation, all of those things? And was reassured that those processes are in place and they are taken seriously. Now, I'm going to meet the Home Office tomorrow to talk about those things again. So it's very much on our agenda as a council, but as a multi-agency group in making sure that we can do everything that we possibly can to help people in a difficult situation politically, nationally, internationally. So yeah, I can give assurances that I feel confident that we have the processes in place in that scenario. I can't talk about the wider issues around the city, but yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Richard. It was a very, well, slightly unfair question given it wasn't covered directly in the remit, but given what's been happening recently, it's really, really good to have that reassurance that those processes are in place, because it's, I know, I'm sure other members of the committee would share the concern about the welfare of the residents in the hotel in light of what they've been seeing outside their door for some weeks now. Are there any other matters members wish to raise? Councillor Arshad, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on your question as well in terms of what I've been doing personally. So I've also visited the Holiday Inn and various with officers, and it's a big part with the housing team who are leading on this. But I know the locality managers as well, and I've been speaking to them about recent events and protests and liaising with Thames Valley Police and the chief inspectors. And I can assure you that there is enough presence in terms of resources that have been allocated to make and ensure that the safety of our residents in well-being and fair. And also there's a lot of resources that have been provided through the locality managers, like for example football, and there have been other activities that are helpful for our migrants to be engaging with, and they've also been coming out with me litter picking, and yeah, it's been really good.
Thank you very much, Councillor Arshad, and thank you for all that you, the locality managers and everyone else involved has been doing. Please.
And I think Oxford City Council also gave commissioning to Asylum Welcome at the end December 2024, who are very closely working with us all, with Oxford City Council, the housing team, CR team, who are often visiting, like Richard said, that he's also going down with his team, and members of his team are also often visiting and liaising with the manager of Holiday Inn, and we're making sure that we connect with the Home Office through housing and other means. So our housing lead has also been taking full responsibility in ensuring that communication and ward councillors or other councillors from the city, if they wish to do so, can get in contact. But we do understand, obviously, that it's not easy for everyone, but they're really working really hard round the clock, supporting them.
Thank you. I mean, I think this is an area where, if I may, narratively for a minute, we are seeing the council doing itself proud in terms of trying its best to provide support to a vulnerable community. So I think, well, if the committee will permit me to express thanks on behalf of the Scrutiny Committee for that specific support being given to residents in the hotel, which is particularly important.
Yeah, I'd also like to thank the police and our officers. I know Laura and all of the ASB team worked really hard. You can see even from Richard's answers how intensely, closely they work with the partnership. And every time I've spoken to the officers, they're in touch with not only Oxfordshire County Council, but our community partnership. They're well on it, and I'm really proud of them, and I just wanted you to hear it.
Thank you very much, and I will echo that thanks as well. And thank you for the response, particularly given the question wasn't signposted. It was impressively comprehensive, so thank you, Richard. I'm going to move to recommendations, if that's okay. Councillor Jarvis proposed a recommendation. I know Richard already said they could do that, so shall we make it a formal recommendation, which we can have an easy yes to? Yep. Yeah, I'm glad to see we're all agreed on that. Thank you. Similarly, did you, Councillor Miles, want to make the same point about sweat?
On that, I think maybe the recommendation can be just broadened so that it's for any data that you're providing that it is relevant for trend analysis to ensure that multiple years data is provided so you can see the change over time. Thank you.
Yeah, that to me sounds very, very sensible. Celeste, are you happy with that? That as recommendation one, basically, where there's any data that has the possibility of trend analysis, we would recommend that there is the previous statistics provided so we can have that year-on-year analysis.
Yes, Chair, thank you for that, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Arshad.
Thank you for that. I just want to say that we have got pretty strong leadership in this area. The fact that Oxford is sanctuary authority and the fact that the voices of the asylum seekers themselves are taken down and noted, and there's formal pathways exist for referring safeguarding through the My Concern and adult children triage, etc., is taken very seriously. And also the practical mitigation already in place. Like, for example, we've got free bus pass pilot and the translation work that's also being done with our community engagement team. And we are making sure that we've got that strong commitment to monitoring, obviously pushing for SATs, for safeguarding outcomes for our asylum seekers and publishing them.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, it's really, really useful to have sort of an overview of all of the different things going on, and that we're all on the same page here. I think is a really, really positive place for us to be. I'm going to ask for any more recommendations if there were any people were minded to raise. I think in that case, all that remains is to offer very, very sincere thanks to Councillor Arshad, to Richard, to Laura, for contributing to both the items you've been involved in tonight, but particularly for contributing to this discussion, as I know Mike thanked you already for the previous item. I think, you know, we've had a really, really useful discussion around some specific elements, and we've also been able to come to some stuff that will make the reports more useful going forward in terms of allowing that statistical analysis. So thank you very much. I will now move us on to looking at item 4, which is the work plan. Now, in terms of the work plan, thank you very much. This was circulated quite late in the day, but hopefully people will have had a chance to look things over. Celeste, could I invite you briefly to just make a comment on this, given that it was circulated quite late in the day? Would that be okay?
Of course, Chair. I just wanted to draw the committee's particular attention to the November meeting. So the 5th of November, which is a special meeting for the committee to consider the proposals for the local government reorganisation, and then the ordinary meeting that is scheduled on the 11th of November, which currently has one item, which is the Hackney Carriage Emission Standards report. So those are what is to come for November for the committee. But at the same time, I also want to ask a question to the committee in regard to one of its topics that it requested earlier in the year, in regard to Uber landing into Oxford. With this particular topic, I just wish to know what perhaps the committee might wish to achieve in their consideration of this item, just to kind of have a more defined scope for this topic, if you don't mind, Chair. Thank you.
Of course, thank you very much. And yes, this was something Celeste and I had discussed, and obviously we had suggested as part of our requested commissioned items that we wanted an analysis or report on the impact of Uber entering into the city. But obviously Uber are a private company, and that means that anything we did want to have brought would have to be very defined in scope, in that it would be very difficult for us to make any meaningful recommendations. So it would be useful to get a sense really of what we would like to do with this. Do we want it to be still where we ask for a report, but acknowledge that we basically won't be able to recommend anything? So what we could do is have information brought to us around the impact. I mean, that is a legitimate thing we could ask for. Or would we rather request it in the form of a members briefing and not bring it to the committee? I'd be happy to take a view on this. Councillor Miles?
Yeah, so in the licensing committee, the general purpose licensing committee, where taxi licensing is dealt with, some of these issues have come up a lot already. So one concern I have is that many of the concerns that councillors have maybe brought to the scrutiny committee have possibly been answered already there. So I wonder whether a member briefing might be helpful in the first instance, and then if there are some outstanding issues which are potentially emerging from that, which are concrete and specific, that haven't been addressed, then we could take it forward if need be, but maybe that member briefing might satisfy people's concerns. It's just a thought.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Miles. That's good. And any other thoughts, Councillor Altaf Khan?
Just to clarify, please. In scrutiny committee on 11th of November, there's a Hackney Carriage Vehicle Emission Standard. Is that report coming to the scrutiny?
That report will be coming to scrutiny. It's not connected to the Uber matter we're discussing here,
So
but yeah.
I try to connect with this, so if it's not connected. If that is coming, and would this be possible if we can ask from the licensing team to bring a emission report for private hire, which Uber does cover. Uber is mainly a private hire service, is not Hackney Carriage. And we got the Hackney Carriage emission, and if we ask maybe a written report from the licensing team to put what is the emission standards for generally for private hire, which covers Uber and other private hire, which are nearly 1,000 in the city. And how do, and from there, I think we, including Uber and others, we could make maybe some sort of recommendation on the emission system, because I know we talk a lot about the Hackney Carriage, which is only about 100 something plates, but where we have thousands plus private hire, which is also licensed by the City Council. So we should be seeing, I think, the emission progress or the emission standards, and how do, as a committee, we feel and we should be able to making some recommendation. So I think I would join this with this and asking a report bringing from the licensing team how many Uber and other private hire licensed are in the city, and what the standards are, and how we're trying to control the emission in the city. Because I, again, as I previously said, I do hear from the ground a real face. So people are saying, oh, you're talking about the buses, electric buses, you're talking about the Hackney Carriage emissions, but you're not talking about 1,000 plus other cars which are in running and floating in the city. And remembering, as I remember, in the past, there is a bylaw passed by the licensing that they would give same sort of, I don't know what's the word, privilege as happening to the private hire. So they all can use the bus gates, they can use the bus lanes, they can go to the city wherever they want. So if we're concentrating on 100 but not 1,000, so that is something in a general public is I think, I don't have answer to that. Why we are just concentrating there and not other side where we are also licensing. And I think we should ask some sort of a report. All those companies, including Uber, they have a operating license by City Council, which city have the control over, and asking some information from them as well, and then preparing a report from the licensing team. So thank you.
Councillor Ottino, I'll come to you in just a second. I'm just going to respond briefly just to give some context. The reason that item is coming, that is the item that was previously on the full council agenda. So the reason that item is coming to scrutiny is because it's a matter that's going to Cabinet for decision. Now, I think it would probably be very difficult to ask the officers with no warning to produce a report by the 11th November meeting. What we might be minded to do, however, is to put a recommendation to that item when it comes to scrutiny, asking for such a report to be produced, so that that recommendation goes to Cabinet.
It's difficult, and everything is on computer. If you want to pull that apart, there's only a couple of hours of work using such a report.
You could be right, but I think there might be some further complexities around it, and I wouldn't want to put it on the agenda without working it through with officers, because we need to understand what we'd be asking before we concretely ask. But in terms of the
why do we throw in this Uber question if we can't ask a report? So why we're discussing this about what we should be doing about it? We don't do anything unless we go through the licensing mechanism.
Councillor, could you put your microphone on?
Unless we go through the mechanism of the licensing and operating license, if we can't have that report. Why? I don't understand why we brought this topic of Uber here.
So the reason we've brought the topic of Uber up today was to discuss what we would be asking for. So it might be that that is what we want to ask for, but I still think it would be good to take a sense check from officers whether there would be any prospect of bringing it to November the 11th. I think it's worth stressing there that we have had some items that have been longer standing, even over a number of years, where they haven't had the chance to come. Obviously, officer workloads can be extremely difficult and subject to the exigencies of day-to-day demand. The other thing we are considering in November, just 1 week before that, is the LGR, which is probably taking up a considerable amount of officer time across all departments. Councillor Tino, I know your hand's been up a while, so I'll come to you before we go any further with this.
So I think two things. I don't think we could ask for the data about private hire drivers in the way we do about Hackney carriage licence, because private hire drivers can be licensed anywhere, can't they? And they can operate in this city as long as they.
No, that's not.
No, but we don't set the expectations on their vehicles in the way that we do. We've set specific that's the idea, to set specific expectations around the Hackney carriages that we haven't set around the private hire. So I don't think we.
No, that's not right.
Do you think we have the information about what the vehicles they're driving?
Yeah, we do. The licensing team.
We have the
licensing team does have this information. They have certain standards for a license, issuing a license for private hire, and they also have certain conditions on a operator license, which is a bigger license to operate as a company, and then individual with the driver. Obviously, there is a process to go through if they have the badge, and the vehicle has to go through the process, and that process is set up by the licensing committee and licensing. So it's not right that the way we deal with Hackney is a number restricted. That's the only difference. Otherwise, there is a set standard and mechanism for both private hire and Hackney. And each council, I know that there's one point I think Tino might want to, Simons is mixing up, because we have Vale, South and other districts who also operate and works here. So we can't do about that. But the city council issued license to the private hire vehicle is just on the fingertip with the licensing officer. Now, how many vehicles are there? What the emission system? What's the standard? How long the vehicle should be? How long? So there is a newsletter they issue to each drivers and the vehicle license holder. There are three type of license: operators, car, person. So they all get a newsletter when the council change these standards or ask for, these such age vehicles are going now, these are coming now. Because I just heard from somebody told me in the street while talking about these emissions and bus gates and everything, somebody said the Abingdon Council issued a letter that any vehicle in a private hire, not Hackney, they have a same standard for Hackney and private hire because their Hackneys are not restricted. So they have issued a letter that a vehicle which is older than 2016 and don't have this blue ad, which is a emission system. So from next year, March, those vehicles has to go off the road. So to keep every vehicle from next year, they got the notice, has to be basically above 2016 and have to have the emission standard. So each council have this, the city council have this, and they give same priority to private hire in Hackney as far as Oxford City is concerned. The private hire will be coming through the bus gates. They do use the bus lane, even the local bus lane, because I have a little bit of knowledge of the highways. I've studied in my other area. So the bus lane, which is a local bus lane, is called, can be used private hire in Hackney. there's just where there are some bus lane called just bus lane. So that can be used, vehicles coming outside the other districts, their uses as well. So in the city, there are certain bus lanes or any bus lane is used by city license vehicles.
Thank
So
you.
I can't see honestly any reason for not bringing this information, because this information goes to licensing anyway. So I thought, as you mentioned, with the Uber topic, and there is another report coming. So alongside, if there are a couple of pages of other thing, which will give a further thought to this committee and the councillors, understanding what we can do or we can't do. This is a very basic information to ball rolling and making start of this, as you mentioned, the Uber topic.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give Councillor Miles a chance to come in just a second, but Councillor Rotino as well. I know you might not have got. Yeah, as well, that's what I was going to suggest as a mode of moving forward. Councillor Miles.
So just on, I think Councillor Rotino's point was around clarification on taxi and private hire licensing. I think the point that Councillor Altaf Khan was mentioning was around that we have control over those private hire license that we issue, but it doesn't stop people who have a private hire license that's issued from a different authority operating here. So that's why there are also, in addition to the ones that have got plates for Oxford City, there are other private hires operating here. Just to the points raised by Councillor Khan, I think there is definitely synergies for officers to present some of the information that has been requested, and I think it can be framed related to a briefing, but it's more like a presentation on just an update on trends around private hire vehicles in the city. It's information that has been shared already in licensing, so it may be feasible for them. So maybe we could ask if there is any supplementary information related to this call it a member briefing, but a scrutiny briefing on the topic based on readily available information that they have. Because as I said, I do think that this question was also clarified in our last meeting around some of the emission standards that are required also for private hire, which doesn't get to the crux of the Uber issue, but it's part of the wider issue of an increased supply of private hires in the city, which is, I think, the wider Uber concern. If there are issues around the labour standards on Uber, which was possibly another angle that people were bringing in, maybe that's a different and separate part of the discussion that is maybe it needs greater thought as opposed to the sheer number of new vehicles that are operating. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. It's always helpful to have the chair of licensing in.
Different chair.
Well, one of the chairs. Councillor Rotino, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, with the Uber, I'm not quite sure what we can get out of this now. They've got an operator's license, haven't they? They've fit the criteria. We probably all don't like the idea of their business methods, but we could probably say that about certain banks in the city and certain other banks in the city. We like some, we don't like others. What can we do? They've got a license. Unless they do go wrong somewhere, I think there's very little that the city council can do. We're stuck with them. We could encourage the public to use other. Well, I don't think we probably can't, can we? To sort of use other tax, or we could point out their business methods, but we don't do that about any other. Yeah, we don't do that about our banks or anything else. So yeah, Coulter actually produced a bit of a report in their representation at that licensing committee, didn't they? About different fares that Uber were charging at different times, and that was quite interesting to hear all that. Although it wasn't necessarily relevant to the what we were discussing there, but yeah, I don't really know what we can do about this.
Yeah.
I just wonder actually whether some of the issues that Altaf has mentioned today will come out in the discussion anyway.
Yeah.
Because they did in the licensing committee discussion on the same topic. And so maybe it's a matter of just being prepared with these questions that you've already thought of for that rather than a specific agenda item. It will be the same officers that will be speaking to this topic. They already have the answers for some of this, and then it will be shared in a public domain with some different people that weren't at the other meeting. So maybe that solves the problem.
Thank you.
Just the last question.
Yeah.
To be honest, I know it's going to be slightly controversial here, opposing each other and these ideas. My personal view is that if there are chains which we might like or don't like, but if they go through the process, they are there. There are chains of coffee, chains of groceries, chains of food delivery, transport, Uber. And I honestly do feel it's very unfair if you issue license, operating license, you charge them fee, they pay as operating license. And then if we have some sort of a back burner feelings that, they are what we can do, maybe people not use it, all that sort of things, I don't think that's fair. The council, as a council, as authority, issued operating license to Uber, to any other operators. And then there are certain sort of standard by that operating license, and the fee structure and charging structure, again, licensing have control over that. But again, where they won't have the control, they would set up, say, licensing, say, the minimum you charge £5, and they, say, we give discount to £4 to the public, but their fare is 5. What are you going to do? You're not going. So these are very lengthy topics, but I do strongly feel that once the operating license is issued, every should be treated equally and same standard. If we have this feeling because we don't like their operating models or the business models, why did we let them to come in first place in the city then? And they're operating all over the UK. Every city have the license. This, whether we like model or don't like it, whether I go to a very organic coffee in Headington, you may want to go to Starbucks or somebody coffee. Yeah, you come to where I go to. So it's people's choice where they go and what they do. Again, there are some standards. We have to follow those standards and leave the people how do they, which service they use or they don't use it. But I think personally it would help to have some sort of information coming to scrutiny and making this a proper debate, starting debate. Starting point is only if you have something on the piece of paper and see how the our city is operated and run.
Thank you. I'm going to draw us back into the work plan. I don't want us to get too caught on the specifics of licensing, not least because there are no licensing officers present.
So we should ask, I think at least ask. We should at least ask officers if this information is easily available, can they attach something to the next scrutiny committee? I think it's reasonable to ask. And if they can't, they can't. But this information is not something very complicated or can't be achieved. Anybody, I can put freedom of information request and have this information. So I don't see a reason not to bring it here, and that with that information, with this already which a report is coming and the wider issues, I think we can at least make a start of the discussion. Thank
you. So in terms of the discussion we've had, firstly, in terms of the specific Uber item, in any case, the reason why we would have had problems with that is obviously that it pertains to a specific private company, and therefore it will be very difficult for us to have a meaningful discussion without infringing on things relating to said private company. For some of the reasons that Councillor Altaf Khan has said, and the fact that obviously licensing is a function where we are not necessarily acting as a political body per se. So I think it's very, unless there is a strong feeling to the contrary, I think we are saying that we are happy to shelve having a specific item on Uber. I also hear the fact, firstly, that anything we might ask for in regard to private hires has already come to licensing. So I wonder, therefore, Celeste, if we might add to the work plan tentatively for the 11th of November, a request for scrutiny to hear effectively the material that has already gone to licensing on private hires, noting that we are requesting information that has gone to another part of the council to allow members of scrutiny to raise questions. Would that be a clear request?
I think it's clear and it will help.
Microphone if you're going to.
It will help to see the comparison of Hackney and private hire emission if that report is in licensing already. So attaching 1 or 2 appendices is not a big thing we ask.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to Celeste.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do appreciate the points of the committee. Yes, there's certainly no harm in asking. I do want to point out, though, that one of the functions of the council here is the responsibility of the councils being the quasi-judicial body in this regard. So it might be something that I will need to explore, take away and explore with officers, and whether or not this is appropriately brought to the committee as opposed to any other forum that members can participate in. But yes, I will take it away and I will ask officers if this is possible.
Thank you, Celeste. Appreciate the complexity of an item that's crossing the scrutiny licensing Rubicon. Councillor Ortino.
Can I just ask about the 5th of November one? Is there a reason why that's for scrutiny and not going to be an all-member briefing? Because obviously we know what the 3 proposals are already. The 5th of November, is there something significant about that date? Does the City Council putting its backing behind one after that and we would change something? It seems to me like this. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do as scrutiny. It would be useful to have all that information, but why isn't that for every member as opposed just to us? We can't change those bids because they're already in, can we?
I can answer on that directly. It is a matter that's going to Cabinet the next week, and we will be able to give recommendations on the Oxford City components to Cabinet before their decision, and it will then come to full council following Cabinet. So we are the first chain in a process, if you like, in the same way that other things that come before Cabinet would come before us. Are there any other items on the work plan members wish to raise? I think we've got an agreement for asking what can be done about the 11th. We've got an agreement on not moving forward with the Uber item specifically. Is there anything else on the work plan members wish to raise? Yeah, Councillor Mundy.
I just wanted to inquire, Chair, about moving items that aren't on the work plan and aren't going to be at Cabinet. How do we go about suggesting new items for us to scrutinise that we would like Cabinet to look at?
In simple terms, to raise them at this item. So if there is something you wish to raise, we can raise it. It doesn't guarantee it's going to come to a specific meeting, but you can make suggestions for items you'd wish to see.
Yeah, okay. So I asked a question to Councillor Turner at last council about the council tax debt recovery procedure. He didn't state that there'd been any review of that procedure in recent years. So I'd like to request that we scrutinise a potential review of that procedure. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Celeste, did you get a good note of that to add as a scrutiny request? Thank you. I see thumbs up. Thank you very much. So we'll take that forward. Obviously, again, it's going to depend on officer capacity and various things, but we can add it to the long list easily enough. And just as a reminder for all members, when this work plan comes up, if there are things you want to see added to the long list, you can propose them. Okay, so unless there's anything else on this item, I'm going to move to Cabinet responses. I will keep this reasonably brief, but you'll see on pages 132, 133, and 134, and also 135, and 136 and 37, that you have the responses of Cabinet. We had made a total of 9 recommendations which flowed from the committee and its working groups. Of these, 6 were agreed, 2 partially agreed, and 1 where we were given comments but no clear response. So, I mean, I guess firstly, just to raise as an item around this, is there any questions members had or wish to reflect on those responses? Is everyone satisfied with the responses? I think in light of the time we've had quite a lengthy meeting. I won't make too many narrative comments about the cabinet meeting itself. Broadly, again, we're seeing a reasonable number of our recommendations taken forward, which is good, and things seem to be working reasonably well in that regard. I think, you know, we particularly saw our discussion around the citizen and community engagement policy, and I think there were some really, really good responses to that based on the stuff we'd raised, and that's the thing that's come from full committee. So I think broadly we can be reasonably happy with the recommendations and how they've been taken up by cabinet. Unless there's anything further on that, we are asked just to note it. So if we're all happy to note it, that would be fantastic. Celeste, I just want to check, do you have it? Did you have anything to add on that item?
Not particularly on the cabinet reports, the chair, it's the next item.
Yeah, thank you. So then we'll move to finally the updates from working groups. And the only working group that's met since our last meeting was the Finance and Performance Working Group. So Celeste, if I pass over to you for a quick update on that, please.
Thank you. I'm inclined to keep this brief as well, Chair, if you don't mind. As you said, the Finance and Performance Working Group finally met for the first time this year on the 11th of September, and they did discuss 3 substantive items. The first one being the optimism bias applied to commercial properties in the city centre. And then they also looked at the 2 cabinet reports on the 24-25 outturn performance and also the Key 1 performance monitoring report. To keep this short, the working group was overall satisfied with the discussions and what was presented to them, and they were not minded to put forward any recommendations for any of the items. Unfortunately, Councillor Jarvis, who is also part of the working group, has already left to share any of his thoughts. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Celeste. Given that there were no recommendations, we have no recommendations to endorse. So all that remains is to note the dates of future meetings. Now, the next meeting will be the special scrutiny to discuss the local government reorganisation. Just to specifically flag, it's on a Wednesday. Don't come on the wrong day. Don't get caught out by that. And it also means that we have scrutiny in consecutive weeks in November. So I shall look forward to seeing you all twice as often in November for scrutiny. I will end by thanking again Councillor Rowley for stepping in when I was unavailable. Sorry I was a bit late today. And thank you also to Celeste and to Hannah for supporting the work of the committee. Thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you.